moving forward, we'll call January 8th Restoration Day. Okay? That's when the rights that we all voted on for formerly incarcerated people will be restored. What is January 9th? January 9th is when the legislature officially begins to hold its meetings for 2019 legislative sessions, even though they've been having some committee meetings already, but the new legislature will be sworn in on the 8th and they will be seated and doing work on the 9th. What is March 4th? I believe it's March 4th or 5th. It's the beginning of the 2019 legislative session. What is May 3rd? It is the end of the session. Now, the most important thing I want you to be familiar with is January 25th. January 25th is the last day that documents or proposed or supposed or whatever way we want to call it, ideas for legislation can be submitted so that the various committees can work on it. Today, I want to talk about what we must do to make sure that we're part of the game. I put up here the restoration process for formerly incarcerated persons. Now, I deliberately didn't use the word ex-con, and I deliberately didn't use it because part of the restoration process for persons that have been incarcerated and abused while they were being incarcerated and equally abused when they got out is that they have a lack of self-esteem. The most important ingredient in the restorative process is to resume them feeling like they are worthy. So if they were incarcerated, guess what? They are now formally incarcerated. Do you understand what I just said? Yes. So let's be careful on how we address our fellow human beings. And I'm using human beings rather than neighbors, all of that. Because what we have to do is rise above identifiers that can be dividers. And I want us to begin to look at each other as human. Is that okay? Yes. All right. On January 8th, the identification process begins, not with us, not with the formerly incarcerated, but by the Division of Elections of the state, what do they call it? The state, but I know it's Ken Dessler office, Secretary of State. Now, I want to talk about that a minute. I've seen several emails responding to articles in the Sun Sentinel, the Orlando Sentinel, the Daily Commercial, online and all of that, complaining about what Ken Dessler and the election people are doing, and perhaps they are trying to go about some subterfuge. Let me be very clear about it. They're not trying. They're doing. Just like the Nike ad say. They just did it. Okay? What our problem will be if we fall for that okey-doke or that bamboozle. On January 8th, they are tasked with identifying felons, as they call it. We call them informally incarcerated people. They're responsible for certifying that those persons have completed their sentences and complied with all of the requisite of being restored. Our job is not to worry about how they do it. Our job is to make sure they do it. So a challenge I have for you, and I will be talking a little bit more about this at the end of the session, is that on January 8th, we must have identified on our own at least 10 persons that were formerly incarcerated and walk with those people into the courthouse and ask that they be registered to vote. We cannot wait to be reactive. We must be absolute and resolved to be proactive. Identification. All right, let's go on now to the next one. Recruitment. As I just said, we got to find them, we got to enable them, we got to encourage them, and we must empower them with an overwhelming desire to use their entitlement. Let's be clear. I had it somewhere around here. Oh, this little thing called the Constitution. It entitles us to the right of voting. It's their entitlement. It's not a favor. It's not a privilege that someone gave to them. It is their inalienable right as an American citizen. So we must allow them to understand no one is doing you any favors. They're only fulfilling their obligation that you have given them to serve you. Remember, the people that work in the various offices in the county, state, or wherever, they're there only because we've given them the privilege of serving us. And the only way they can continue to serve us without regards to our concerns is for us not to take that entitlement called the vote and use it properly. Meaning, if they don't serve us properly, we can fire them. And the only way we can fire them is fire the people above them who are the elected officials. And once the new elected officials come in, they have the authority to place into place whoever they want, especially in the leadership positions. There are some positions within government, as we all know, that are hands off, because of what is the word? Civil service and all of that. But the department heads and all of that can be fired. So we must find them, enable them, encourage them, and empower them. All right? Let's go to the next one. Reclamation of franchise. It might seem simple that when January 8th comes, people will be given their restored privilege, right to register to vote. But let me ask you a question. How many of you took part in voter registration drives over the last year or so? How many of you had problems registering people to vote? How many of you got frustrated when you heard that there were all kinds of people eligible to vote, but they did not vote or did not register? How many of you got frustrated when you try to get people out to vote on election day or before. Now, the people that you were dealing with were the ones that always had the right to register and vote because they were already eligible. Can you imagine if you had difficulty with them? What would be the difficulty with people that have just gotten out of a locked up situation where they have been not treated as human beings, but as inmates, as numbers, in a total regimented environment? Getting out of that environment, they face some similar things with friends, families, jobs, and everything else. Now, if the ones that always was eligible to vote, we found difficulty with them, can you imagine what it's going to be working with these individuals that will just have their rights restored? Think about it. Okay? So on January 8th, in addition to taking that 10 or so to vote, I am going to challenge us to come up with a continuum of care with a series of interventions and entry points that would assure that the vast majority of persons that were formerly incarcerated will have a reasonable chance of exercising their newfound rights. All right? Do you understand what I just said? Yes. I am challenging us. I am saying to all of us that we are the preeminent Democratic club in the state of Florida. We have the greatest aggregation of mental prowess, meaning intelligence, of anywhere else in the state. And if anyone, or if any group is going to put together the protocols to achieve equity for these individuals, it is us. Yeah. And only us. When we wrote to Desmond the other day, we went into one of our VDC modes, and we portrayed the level of arrogance, or I should say, assertiveness, that we are rightfully due. We told Mr. Meade and all others that it's great that you're going to have January 8th as the inflection point. It's going to be even greater because the Villages Democratic Club will have January 8th as the rollout of a continuum of care that take care of formerly incarcerated people from release through their transition, through their resource conversion, and a total understanding of their existential situational awareness. Let me walk through all of those, because I think it's important that we understand this. I'm going to ask someone to be kind enough to give me a cup of water, because I don't want to play the Marco Rubio. But my throat is getting dry. And when my throat gets dry, I started remembering all of the beverages that I've had all my life. And some of them I don't indulge in anymore. But when my throat is dry, I might drink anything. And I sure don't want to go back to Cavassier XO. But let's talk about these things. Release. Release is the beginning of what we're going to refer to as reentry. And remember now, reentry is a longitudinal process that we will call a continuum of care. All of these things are part of the reentry process, but release is just the first part of it. That means when a person is released from whatever institution they were in, they're coming back into society. Some come directly back to their families, and a great deal of them come back by virtue Thank you. Thanks for the vodka. And it was not just vodka, it was Grey Goose. So when they're released, they can be released to their families, but we also know that quite a few of them are released into custodial institutions. I think there are several here in the villages that do that kind of work. I think Hope has one, New Covenant has one. There's quite a few groups that do the custodial kind of care for individuals. Now, I'm going to introduce you to a word that I want you to understand that we're going to provide for the rest of the state. And this word is windfall. A windfall is when you didn't have nothing, and all of a sudden you were endowed with the blessings of the Creator because you have abundance. So that's what we're going to do for the rest of the state. I have a windfall of water, and so thank all of you. So at release, part of our continuum of care, we're going to have to establish some protocols that we can successfully intervene at release point with those formerly incarcerated persons, whether they go into a custodial environment or whether they go home. And the reason why we want to intervene with them is because our objective is not just for them to come back into the community. Our objective is to make them whole. Did you understand what I said? Our objective is to make them whole. Now, we know that the custodial groups are going to look at certain aspects of their lives, and their family is going to look at other aspects of their lives. But what we're going to do is look comprehensively at all of their life so that we can make them whole. So we got to figure out a way that we can intervene at release. That's going to take us having to deal with the penal institutions and the people that run those. And that's going to take expertise on our part. It's going to take diligence on our part. It's going to take, most of all, knowledge on our part of how the system works. Because I can guarantee you that we will not be welcome to try to work to make people whole. So the only way you can stop people from being nefarious and committing subterfuge is to walk into whatever environment you're walking into with superior knowledge and a superior aim. That's what the VDC does. Okay? Release. Transition is that part of what they go through when either they're at home or at their custodial facility, when they begin to go out and meet people and feel the slings and arrows of rejection. Now that's a harsh word to use, but a lot of formerly incarcerated people get rejection. And we're going to work with them to give them the tools, and there are tools that they can use to mitigate the harshness of the rejection. We can't get rid of the rejection, but we can give them the tools to overcome the rejection. Okay? The next one is resource conversion. This one is probably the one that we're going to have to partner with other people on, because there are organizations already established that are experts in resource conversion. That is, if a person was incarcerated, just like persons that were in the military or wherever, they have perfected a set of skills. And the government, in its wisdom, has a set of protocols that allow those skills from whatever environment they were previously in to be converted into resume enhancing workable skills on the outside. And I say on the outside even for military, because you will find that a lot of military people coming out of the military face some of the same conditions that people coming out of incarcerated situations find. They don't necessarily get the rejection, but they do find that it's very difficult to explain to people that that little job right there I can do with my eyes closed. But since they don't have the resume and the experience, people reject it. So what we got to do is get into resume resource conversion to make those things that they did applicable to the work environment. And we will do that. Now this fourth one, I guess you're all trying to figure out, what in the heck is that? Existential situational awareness. Now, existential situational awareness is probably the thing that has been the most devastating force that has plagued especially the Democratic Party over the last 20, 25 years. Now, I'm going to say this, and I know some of you are going to say, that man is gone crazy. The guy named Donald John Trump, who became our 45th president, whether we like him, loathe him, or hate him. One thing that, if we're going to be honest and play this game, and this is a game, politics is a game. It has certain rules, and unless you're willing to play those rules based upon what the game called for, we will not be successful. Okay? Compassion is great, but competence is even greater. Time and talent is great, but treasury is even greater. You cannot win in politics unless you're competent and you have money. We are all going to be always compassionate because that's what we are as Democrats. We're always going to give up our time because that's what we do as Democrats. We're always going to have the talent because we would jump out there trying to do something if we didn't know what we were doing. And even if we don't know how to do it, we know where to go find it, because there are volumes on how to do various things all over the country. But the thing that we're missing is the competence to execute and the treasury to allow us to do the execution. That's what situational awareness, that's when that's come in. To be situationally aware, one must be thoroughly abreast of the conditions in which we are walking into. If we're going to register voters in Lake Pan, or Oxford or Coleman or Royal, and we don't have an appreciation of all of the systemic issues surrounding Lake Perrin, Oxford, Coleman, or Royal, then we're going to have a disconnect with the people that live there. We will go in with well-founded notions of wanting to do the right thing, but the right thing might not be the right thing for them at that time. And we come out and say, they should know better. They should know that they need to vote, so we won't have that man in there. We do it. We do it. We complain even when the vote don't turn out. We said, now we should have had more people out to vote. Nelson lost by 10,000, Gillum by 30. And we complain because the people didn't get out to vote. No, we were not competent enough to get them out to vote. Do you see how that works? It's not on them, because they didn't say they were going to be the Democratic Party and the Democratic Club. They were just going to be voters that we were going to go to and ask to come out. So we ostensibly were saying that we are going to move you. Because if they were going to move on their own, hey, they wouldn't even need us. They would already be motivated. So if they didn't get motivated, it's not their fault, because they weren't motivated in the first place. It's our fault. And if they couldn't get to the polls, it ain't their fault. They couldn't get to the store yesterday. And we say, well, they can get everywhere else. No, they can't. And that's a very imperialistic view of people that are in dire straits. Oh, they can get this, they can buy that, they can do this. No, they can't. If they could, they would. We got to stop with the imperialist attitude and understand that we were given much. And therefore, what? Much must be given. Let me tell you something. Unless we can get people to understand the existential concerns of those that we're trying to move, we will never move them. Let me ask you a question. What are some of the human dynamics and dimensions that you think an ordinary person encounter on a daily basis? Just name me one.
Shelter.
Shelter is one. Another. Food is another.
Safe clothing.
Okay, we can go on and on and on. In our research, we have found that there's actually 15 dimensions that are essential, and that's what this is. Existential is essential to their existence. There's 15 dimensions. They include things like transportation and all of those kinds of things. And we must master understanding what those dimensions are in the various communities we live in. If I ask you to look at the villages and ask you to cite me 2 human conditions or human needs that is not being met just by observation, what would number 1 be?
Public transportation.
Huh?
Public transportation.
Okay, transportation. And you said public, but transportation is the issue. Name me another.
Healthcare.
Healthcare. See, these are things that people are going to be thinking about, and what we assume when we knock on their door and say we need you to register to vote, they're going to stop thinking about healthcare and transportation or paying the rent so that they will have shelter all of a sudden we expect, because our agenda is to get them to vote or register to vote, they're going to put all that aside and say, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Wright, I'm going to register to vote. That is fantasy. It is fantasy. That's why we have to be willing to do the kinds of canvassing. Bob and I talked about this yesterday. Canvassing is one thing, but assessment is another. We must go in and assess communities to find out what their needs are. What their needs are. Generally, when we do campaigns starting with, we got a candidate. And we do campaigns based upon what that candidate's platform is. Well, Villages Democratic Club, guess what? We don't have to do that no more. We can now be innovative and go beyond just doing what everybody else was doing and begin to write a new script on how to. Did you hear what I said? No one else's agenda but ours. And ours put at the center of it the person that we're trying to move. We're trying to move people. We're trying to get them out of a state of mental lethargy into one of enthusiasm and empowerment. And the way we do that is being able to understand their existential needs and how those needs are being met or unmet in their current situation. Existential situational awareness. Am I making any sense to you?
Yes.
If I'm not, I'm still going to keep talking. Because everything I'm saying to you, I have in writing, I'm going to give to you at some point. Because we are going to assume our rightful mantle as the preeminent club. We are going to be the research and development arm for the Democratic Party to come up with solutions to problems rather than reacting to the shiny object. One of the biggest problems with Chicken Little, not that Chicken Little wasn't right to look for a disaster, but he did it every time something failed. And we do the same thing. We read an article in the paper saying they were having confusion over how they're going to implement restoration. And the next thing I know, the internet was burning up with us saying, oh, here they go again. And I say to you, let them go on January 8th. We're going to be there with 10 people and force them to make a decision. In other words, we have to take charge. Now, I'm going to do a little anecdotal thing. I've been up before you several times and talked about, I've introduced people, but I really haven't introduced myself. I'm going to say two things about me that I think you need to know. Two things about me that I think you need to know. How many of you from New York? From the city, I mean.
No.
Because the rest of it is really. Back in the early 60s, I was privileged to attend a place called the Encampment for Citizenship. Now, the Encampment for Citizenship, I went for 3 consecutive years. It was at a place up in the Bronx called the Filson School. And how many of you are familiar with the Filson School? Okay, the Filson School. Now, as a matter of fact, there was 3 schools up there. Was Horace Mann, Riverdale and Filson School. And they were called the Hill Schools. And those are the schools that were really foundational for most of the modern thought of how to get things done in the country. The Filson School, Encampment for Citizenship, along with the Penn Center in South Carolina at Frogmore, and the Hollywood Center, educated all of us back in the days of the Civil Rights Movement. In other words, in order to be in the Civil Rights Movement, we just couldn't walk out there and say, I'm here. You had to know something. In other words, the Encampment for Citizenship forced us to go into the city and find a project and come back and solve it on paper. As a matter of fact, the mantra was deed before creed. In other words, you got to do something before you can become something. And sometimes you don't have to fulfill all of it, but you got to put it on paper. And this is not a new notion. This goes all the way back to Abrahamic law, the promise. The promise is you will be. The plan is here's how to do it. So in other words, we must come up with postulates and plans. That's what I'm asking all of you today. To join me over the next couple of weeks or 3 weeks in putting the 10 together and putting the paper together so that on January 8th we can do two things. Present the 10 and present the paper under the aegis of the Democratic Club of the Villages. Because unless we define the restoration process, unless we define how to acquire health, unless we define how to make education equitable to everyone, unless we do those things, guess what? They're not going to be done. And at the same time, let's go to the next one. We're talking about the ascendancy of our club. Some of you are going to get angry with me when I say these next few things. Because you're going to be just like Trump was sitting at the funeral. Even though I won't be talking about you, you'll know that it's you. The Villages Democratic Club must move from infancy to incredibly influential. Infancy is where we are now. On October 13th, we became incredibly influential. I've written a little paper on October 13th. Even though you were there, you didn't see yourself there. I have done a recap of that, and I'm going to give it to Heather or whoever so they can put it on the website so you can read about yourself. See, it's nothing like memorializing what you do because the archives support the history, and the history make you institutional. You have to have institutionalization, but you can't have it without memorialization. And we've memorialized what you did on October 13th when you became the president of the club. Remember now, that week was a week of the infamous Michael hurricane, and everything fell apart. We had people demanding that we needed to let them into that meeting up at Savannah Center on that Sunday and Monday. They hadn't done anything with the club now, but they were demanding to get in. On Tuesday when the hurricane hit, and there was a chance that Mr. Gillum wouldn't come, those same people that was demanding disappeared. because they were not true to our cause. They were there for the celebrity. They were there for the occasion, not for the opportunity to make a difference. But 675 of us came. And the optics of that day was just spectacular. If you could have seen the way you moved, I mean, the ushers collecting that money would have put to shame the ushers at, what's his name, Joel Osteen Church. And they did the fastest collecting the money in the world. But Mary and Barbara and all of them, they were so fleet on their feet. You would have thought they were the American Ballet Company. It was a performance to behold. The room, it was a tapestry. Well, when we first came in, it was just a blank wall. Much like Michelangelo must have felt when he walked into the Sistine. When Julia said, "You got to paint the ceiling." We came into that room, looked at it, and we Michelangelo'd it. There was nothing ever in the villages that can compete with what happened that morning. You were magnificent. In other words, you moved from infancy to incredibly influential. Now let's do the rest. We must move from insurgency to gravitas. Both do the same thing. Gravitas is taking control. Insurgency is attempting to take control. We have control, so we no longer need to be insurgents. Did you hear what I said? Yes. So we don't need to try to take control anymore. Because what? We have control. We must move from grievance to governance. See, we've been complaining about what the government wouldn't do or couldn't do. We don't have to do that anymore. We now can tell the government, this is your shortfall, and we've written this particular paper on how you can remediate that problem that you have. Did you just get what I said? We're into the remediation process for these incompetents that call themselves the stewards of our government. So let's move from grievance and complaining about what they ain't doing to governance and showing them what they must do, like we will do on January 8th. See how I sneaked that one back in there? Activism is great, and we're going to always be active. But activism without advocacy is meaningless. We must be advocates. We must reach out and tell people we're with you, and let's do this. So we have to be the advocates. We must move from confrontation to communications. Now I know some of you are in here now on pins and needles because you want to go and confront DeSantis about his agenda. First of all, he don't know what it is. You want to go confront DeSantis about his agenda. First of all, he doesn't know what it is. And we're going to be confronting him on something he doesn't know about. So, to me, that's an exercise in fulfillment of our need to be, but it's not an exercise in causing change. And we must call change. What we ought to be doing is coming up with an agenda crafted by the Villages Democratic Club and be willing to walk into the state capitol on March 4th and go to every one of our local officials and every one of our constituent officials, meaning the Black caucus, the Hispanic caucus, the LGBT people, all of these people, and say, here's our agenda. Will you push it for us? See, it's not enough to complain about what other people ain't doing. What we have to ask ourselves, what did I do? As Michael said, I've got to start looking at the man in the mirror. Is it me or is it somebody else? And right now it's us, because we have the talent to do anything. It's just whether we will have the will. So we must stop confronting and start communicating. And let me tell you something that they used to say at the school. I never forget, there was a guy named Al Lowenstein. I don't know how many of you know him, but he was assassinated up in New York some time back. But Al used to say, if it ain't in writing, it doesn't exist. Talk is like a wind. We must put it in writing and submit it to the people that can act on it, communicate. We must also move from agitation to articulation. Now you're going to love this one. You're going to love this one. On October 1st, the first bookend for our ascent into preeminence took place. How many of you remember what that was? That was the epic golf cart parade. We didn't agitate, cogitate, or contemplate anything on that day. We went out and articulated, this is how you do it. When that 300 golf carts, they said 250, I'm saying 300, mine's just as good as theirs. As a matter of fact, it was 310. Give it up. Don't ever just do 300, 301, 315, whatever. But anyway, we articulated that day. We said, this is who we are. Articulation. With that, people, I'm going to say, I need to work with some of you. I'm nearing my last hurrah, because physically and otherwise I can't do too much more. But I have a lot of stored knowledge that I want to share with everyone, and I'm willing to do it. And on that basis, I have worked through Heather, and she's gotten some people with clipboards to walk around. And what I'm going to ask you to do, those of you that want to be part of articulating a paper that will be published on January 8th about the restorative process, or those of you that want to be part of finding 10 individuals that will be willing to walk into the courthouse on January 8th. We need your help. Okay, you can walk down aisles. Anybody that want to sign up, please sign up. But I need people to sign up for that. As we move forward, we'll be doing other things. We'll do something on healthcare. We'll do something on every one of them. So by January 25th, I said March 4th, but by January 25th, it's going to be a carload of a van load of us going to Tallahassee and presenting them to the legislature. Okay? So if you can do that for me, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, when you come to me, when we're going to meet, and let me say what we're going to do. Optics is everything. We're going to, there's a place down in Coleman called the Enrichment Center. It's right in the community. Now I'm telling you, if you're going to work on this project, we can't work on the project in the villages. We need to work on the project in the community where the people live. So we're going to use the Enrichment Center to be the focal point of our work between now and January the 8th. I'll get in touch with you if you fill out the form, and I'll tell you the time and how to get to the place. Because we got to do this. We got to be the answer.
Thank you.